Silent Hill the Arcade, and this is an interesting one because it's a light gun shooter, like an actual arcade game. And you know what the most baffling thing is? It was co-developed by members of Team Silent, developers of the first 4 Silent Hill games, making this arguably the last game that Team Silent worked on, even if it's not all of them, and not only them. It's an hour-long experience that was never officially ported to any other platform, but a fan actually decided to port it to PC, and while there are problems with this version, I got it to work after a bit of tinkering. So thank you so much to whoever created it. The game itself is pretty easy to explain. You go through different locations and shoot enemies, both from the first 4 games. All movement is done by the game itself, except for a few branching paths, and you cannot pause it. You literally only shoot your pistol, or shotgun or rifle if you can find them. No manual reloading either, but honestly, the game does it so fast that I almost asked myself why it's there at all, or why it isn't there for the shotgun and rifle. That aside, we have one more gameplay feature, and that is the ability to play in co-op. There are multiple characters that travel together, more than 2 actually, and it made for an interesting dynamic. They can even die if you don't save them. But overall they don't influence much, aside from commenting on things during gameplay, which always reminded me that someone is there with me. That's pretty unique in the franchise. Most of the time you're completely alone in the other games. And the ability to play in co-op on top of that? I wish I could experience it at some point, because I can only imagine how that changes the dynamic. But is the fact that there are multiple characters reflected in the story at all? I'm glad you asked. The answer is yes. Kind of. The basic premise is that a group of friends is interested in one of the town's mysteries, one that's actually referenced in Silent Hill 2, so they go there and obviously get trapped. The mystery in question is about a ship that disappeared 75 years prior after a girl was thrown off of it and drowned. And you know what? One of the main characters is the great-grandson of that ship's captain. And while in the town, our group encounters a girl who looks just like the one who drowned. So what you got here is a surprisingly deep and twisted Silent Hill story. I'm not even joking, it was genuinely good. Of course, some things are inspired by other games in the series, like 2 important female characters looking the same. But that's all they are, inspirations. They make you go, huh, I recognize this. But not much more. The story itself is completely original and, much like other games, even ties into the world itself, with things like the ship's horn acting as the siren that announces the other world.
Hey, what happened? A boat whistle?
Like, they actually tried with this one. The only thing I can really criticize here is the bad ending, which is the one I got. It does a pretty bad job at explaining what the hell was even going on, but after reading and watching the other ones, there are a total of 4 by the way, I got it and was honestly fascinated by how much the developers were able to fit in here. Really, all things considered, this is a better story than some other games in this series, and I cannot stress enough how impressed I am by this, considering that this is just a 1-hour arcade game. This is exactly what I wished for in Silent Hill The Escape, which is also just a mindless shooter. And on top of the interesting story, you also get some interesting locations. While you go through some of the best known ones, like the town itself or the mall from Silent Hill 3, you also have things like the Endless Staircase from Silent Hill 4 or the museum from Silent Hill 2. That made for a pretty unpredictable experience. I kept wondering where the game would take me next and often got it wrong. Silent Hill 1's elementary school or the subway station from Silent Hill 4 aren't included here, instead we get things like Silent Hill 2's Labyrinth. The lack of transitions between most locations was a shame, usually you just teleport I guess? But I found the choice of locations fascinating, and it's the same with enemies. There are a bunch of different enemy types and bosses, including classics like the dog and Pyramid Head, but also ones you wouldn't expect, like these things from Silent Hill 4 or the Splitworm as a boss. So here too, they took some of the best known ones and mixed them in with some pretty obscure ones. That's just interesting. And on top of that, you also have original enemies, including Robbie the Rabbit? And 3 whole bosses that are very specific to this game's story, with interesting designs and some symbolism or actual plot relevance. So not only does this game look like Silent Hill, especially in the cutscenes, but the first-person perspective during gameplay gave it a very different vibe that I just loved. Can someone remake the first 4 games in first person, please? Thank you. It also sounds like Silent Hill. The music, the random little sounds, the trashy voice acting, everything is here. And then we also get the interesting story, of course, which ties into the world surprisingly well. Obviously, the town is based on the previous games, and some things don't make any sense here, like Pyramid Head or the Endless Staircase. Those are very specific to their respective games, and I would have preferred to just not have them here. But the things that are specific to this game, for the most part have a lot of meaning and would not work in any other Silent Hill game. I loved that. This 1-hour light gun shooter feels incredibly faithful to the series, also having things like locked doors with hidden keys and even a toilet with something inside. It really shows that the developers tried their best to provide an actual Silent Hill experience within this format that they chose for some reason. And I can't believe that I'm saying this right now, but it also feels more faithful to the series than some of the survival horror games did. It was an incredibly fun experience that didn't even feel like an hour. I swear it was over in like 20 minutes. Seeing how it's apparently still active in some locations, maybe I'll get the chance to play it on an actual arcade at some point. I would definitely love to, and honestly prefer that over playing this version again, because despite all the praise, this port is just not a great experience. I had to download extra software just to make it run for more than 5 minutes, and it's a 480p game that is stretched and locked to full screen, so it shifts everything else out of my screens. Meaning when I played it on stream, I actually had to open the stream on my phone to be able to read chat. Follow me on Twitch. And on top of that, if you tab out of the game, that's it. You're not getting back in. And tabbing out also happens if you accidentally click outside of the game, which is pretty easily done because my mouse feels much faster in this resolution and enemies appear on the edges a lot. No! I clicked outside of it. Ah, no. It luckily only happened once a few minutes in, but you could end up having to replay the whole thing right before the final boss. And this port also has a bug where if you skip a cutscene, the audio of it will still play over the gameplay. Understandable considering they were never meant to be skipped, but I'm just trying to say that this port, while functional, is far from perfect and actually prevents me from replaying the game, no matter how much fun I had with it. I would love to play this game more often, I really mean it, to explore all the branching paths and try to get higher scores with each playthrough, because it genuinely is a lot of fun. But that requires a good port of the game, not just a functional one. And port aside, there is one more thing that bothered me about this game. It kept switching to and from the other world way too much. Instead of letting it breathe and only switching every 10 minutes or so, this game switches back and forth all the time. I love both realms, and they are adapted beautifully in this game, but come on! By the way, random side note, there is no way that this bit from PT...
The father purchased the rifle used in the crime at his local gun store 2 days earlier. This brutal killing took place while the family was gathered at home on a Sunday afternoon.
...is not inspired by this bit from Silent Hill the arcade.
I just don't understand it at all.
Me neither. It feels like I'm losing it.
As the suspect for the murder-burglary which occurred in Silent Hill.
Overall, I had a lot of fun and I'm super glad that I was able to play it at all. Thank you so much once more to the person who ported it. I kept smiling throughout my playthrough and was super hyped about all the small things I saw. It was incredible to play an official, proper 3D Silent Hill game that I had never played before and that didn't suck. Like, it's been 12 years since we got a full game and even longer since the last good one. I cannot put into words how amazing it was to experience another somewhat cryptic story in this world with some actually fun gameplay. And the first person perspective made for such an interesting change of pace too. It was amazing to see some of these locations in this perspective. Speaking objectively, this game is probably not the best thing ever, but this feeling of experiencing something new from a neglected franchise that I hold so dearly to my heart, and that feels so faithful to the franchise, is just unbeatable. I hope the upcoming games, as well as the short message, which I have yet to play, are good, because holy sh*, we fans are Silent Hill deprived, and the arcade showed that it doesn't need a 10 out of 10. All it needs is a solid game and an interesting story.